Hey everyone, we are back once again. It is Wednesday. That means we are live. And Dave, welcome back. You're here again.
Thank you. Very excited for another week. Here we are, 2021, getting settled in. All kinds of exciting things going on, and I am happy to be back to answer some questions.
So, Dave, what's new in your life? Before we get to all the questions, tell me, is there anything new or exciting or changes that's been happening with you?
So we've got all kinds of things going on. Number one, I can't hear, so unfortunately, that's been a little bit problematic. And when I say that, I on New Year's Day, I end up losing the hearing in my right ear. The doctors are still trying to figure it out, but it's been a week now, and they still haven't gotten that back. So that's been not exciting, but it's been something I'm adapting to. And then yesterday, one of my daughters got a mission call. She's going to go serve a mission for our church in California here in a couple of months.
Well, that's super cool. Lots of changes. Every time I talk to you, I feel like there's always some changes that are happening.
What about for you, CR? Anything new and exciting in your life?
Well, besides my farm life, I mean, I finally did take care of one of my animals for the first time, and I was able to pluck feathers and watch the whole process. And I still don't know how I feel about it. It's one of those weird things when you're in this world to go through that process. So that's been one of the new and bizarre things because as you have animals, I mean, obviously you make room or you adjust, and so I'm learning this process. I don't know if I like it very well, but I'm learning.
Yeah, it is something that's unique. Having gone through it a lot as a kid, remember plucking many chickens. I remember skinning many cows, pigs, animals. And it was just something that was part of our life. That it is definitely something different. I noticed too, you got one of the other benefits of farming on one of your posts that you had a leak in your pipe that you ended up getting it frozen and it ended up bursting. Is that right?
Yeah. So yesterday I ended up having to go and I called a friend over and we had to fix a pipe and dig the whole. Not we didn't have to dig the whole thing out. Luckily, we were able to buy enough pieces we could put the old thing back together again, but just stop it from leaking for the winter. And then in the summer, we're gonna have to go back and re-dig up. And it was only 2 feet above ground and then 4 feet below ground, if you can believe that. So it's a 6 foot pipe that I have to dig up. And there's no way I could do that when the ground is rock hard.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges living in a cold environment is when those pipes burst during the wintertime. It is a miserable experience.
Yeah, it is awful. And Dave, again, once we're here, we are talking about retirement and we have our Facebook and YouTube for those who are here live. We go through, I ask you a series of questions, you answer those, and we encourage those who are watching live to get on and submit their questions. So if any of you have any retirement questions, I want you to go ahead and submit those. And also let us know where you're watching from. I think it's always fun to see people from all over that are watching the show live, and especially from both Facebook and YouTube. And we really appreciate you being here. And even for those who are watching on replay, it's really fun to see their comments. And Dave, it's amazing to see how much this progresses every week and see how many people that jump on even on replay. It's really kind of fun.
Yeah, it is. No, it's definitely a fun experience. And it looks like we've got Jeff and Corey back too with us now. I had a chance to talk to them about 20 minutes ago. So good to see you guys again.
Yeah, things are definitely growing, and it's fun to have repeat people back on. So, Corey and Jeff, hello, welcome. In fact, Corey told me that they take their lunch break just for this show. So, I thought that was pretty fun so they could see that.
Yeah, we need to start sending lunch to them so they can get lunch from us. So maybe we'll have to do that here in the near future so they can have lunch delivered.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, Dave, are you ready to jump into some more questions today?
Yes, I am. Let's get started.
All right. So, Jim is our first one. And Jim says, I have most of my liquid assets invested into FDIC bank accounts. Is this a smart move?
Jim, when we look at the FDIC insurance, and for those of you that are not familiar with this, what you've got is a situation where if you're putting your money in a bank account, the FDIC is insuring the balances up to $250,000 per account. So on the surface, it seems great because you're saying if something goes wrong, if everything goes south in the markets, that I've got the backing of the federal government to protect the assets that I have inside of there. Well, to me, there's two issues that we've got here. And the first one's the biggest by far. And that is assets inside of these FDIC insured bank accounts are not growing at the rate of even inflation. So even though you're thinking you're as secure as you've ever been, in reality, you're losing money year after year after year after year. And people don't often realize that. They forget the effect that inflation has on their savings, how it completely starts to deplete the buying power that it offers. And the second thing is, it's my belief, now this is my opinion, if we ever get to a point that the FDIC insurance has to step in, especially to the main banks that we have out there, we've got a lot of bigger problems. And even though they may be able to provide you with some security for the investment you have, my guess is inflation and other things are going to be so rampant, the protection's not going to be quite what you expect it is. Now, and when we look back 20 years ago or 30 years ago, 40, when we look at the old savings and loans institutions, a little different story. But again, I think when we look at it in today's day, I would not recommend you put substantial amounts of money inside of those bank accounts based upon current market conditions.
And Dave, just in general, as we talk about bank accounts, let's talk about savings accounts. Are these good places to keep money, like emergency fund or maybe short-term goals for cars or vacations? I mean, is this a good place to kind of keep that and store that?
Yes, that's what you want inside of there. So you do want 6 months of basic living expenses inside of that account once you reach retirement. And during your working years, you want some money in there as well. Usually you have access to funds a little easier during your working years than you do during retirement, because in retirement, it's hard to go get loans or do other things. But you do want 6 months. So we do want an amount in there. But again, this is not productive money. The challenge is you oftentimes have money that's growing maybe at 0.25%. And we see situations, I know I've got clients that have got millions of dollars in these accounts. They won't move them. They don't understand the effect of inflation. And as a result, their buying power is just getting eroded day after day after day.
And we know savings accounts, I mean, they earn a nominal interest rate, but are there other savings accounts that maybe are a high yield account that pay higher interest that we could look at if we are doing something like this?
There are, but you still, with current interest rates, are going to struggle with inflation. You've got your certificates of deposit, or what I like to call certificates of disappointment, because they return such a low rate of interest. They're going to be higher in your bank account. You've got money market account that's going to be higher than your traditional savings account. But we're talking maybe 1%, 1.5% tops if you were to get to where most of these fall. I don't know what the current average is on a CD, but again, you're not going to keep ahead of inflation. So no matter where you're putting, yeah, you're getting closer. But again, if that gap, if you've got a boat that's leaking, I don't care if you've got a small hole or a big hole, pretty soon you got a problem. The big hole is just going to sink you faster. A small hole, it's like, okay, well, I got more time to sit here and worry about it before everything falls apart. And that's the problem you've got when you have a plan like this, where you're not keeping up with inflation. If you got too much money, is pretty soon everything's going to collapse. Now, how soon does it happen? Maybe you can get to shore before the boat fully sinks, but you're going to have some uncertainty there.
And I think Jeff and Corey, who are on, I'm sure they've got their boats down in Southwest Florida, and they definitely don't want to turn down their lunch offer. And so.
Yeah, please don't. So we need to do that, CR. We need to make sure they got some lunch heading their way.
I'll do that. Chantel also says, I had that problem and it was costly. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're learning through all of this process. I mean, as we're always talking and doing these conversations, we're learning a lot. I mean, that's the thing, is we're learning about all of these things we can adjust. And if we do have our money in the wrong place, it is very costly. All right, Dave. So let's go to our next question. This one's from Angelica. I am in my early 60s. Is there hope for me to get to the 0% tax bracket in retirement?
Yes, Angelica. When you look at it, one of the things that you need to understand is that 60 is an early age. When you look at trying to get to tax free, you could have average life expectancy for you as a female is age 88. So you've got probably another 26 years on average. 25% chance you live into your 90s, a 10% chance you live past 100. So you've got a lot of years left. Now, it is going to require some transitioning, but the great thing for most people, once they're hitting in their 60s, is usually they're getting to a point that maybe that income from work's going down. We've got a situation where, hey, we're going to retire. We don't have that income from work. So now we've got this big window of opportunity to say, look, I can do all kinds of transfers, stay in very low tax brackets, get that money moved over in the next 5 or 6 years, and then enjoy retirement from maybe 67 to 70 for the rest of those years, be able to enjoy tax-free retirement.
And Angelica, I'm sorry I slaughtered your name. I mean, I get through so many of these names in here. I'll probably slaughter half of them, but we'll keep going. But Dave, so if she's in her early 60s, what about those who are in their maybe just hitting 70, or those 50? Where is this is there a perfect place to be at that 0% tax bracket?
There is no perfect place. Everyone's facts and circumstances are different. We have people that are in their 70s I'm meeting with on a regular basis that we're able to do some transitioning for them. Now, the older you get, the less chance you're going to have to be able to get a full transition. But we're working with people in their 70s, people in their 50s, down even into their 30s and 40s. Now, when we look at 30s and 40s, usually it's a real good time to accumulate. So a lot of the strategies that we're putting in place in the 50s, 60s, 70s may not apply quite so heavily because you've got different needs, but it still doesn't mean that you can't start working towards that future retirement, because if you will start working towards it in your 30s and 40s, what we find is by the time you get into your 50s, 60s, and 70s, you're in a position where you can take advantage of the strategies that we recommend and eliminate those risks that we're all worried about.
Yeah. And I need to jump back and clarify. Chantel says that she's had the same problem with her pipes. Those were in her basement. So we're always trying to correlate everything over to finance. So it's always weird when we go back and talk about these other pieces, but I've had that. I even had a water heater break in my basement one time. And in fact, your brother had to come over and change it for me because it flooded my whole basement.
Yeah, see, ours got the best situation ever because my brother, who lives in the same town that he does, can fix anything. I mean, anything. He is the guy that you want to call. If you've got anything broken, he will be there. He has the ability to figure it out, to fix it. In fact, he oftentimes takes it on as a challenge. So you do want a guy like my brother Johnny living next to you so that you can call him and have it taken care of. And you're definitely in a great world there. I miss having him around to be able to take care of the many issues I seem to always have.
And I won't tell you that he just fixed my garage door just 2 days ago. So everything around me seems as it gets colder, it starts to break and freeze. And in the summer and spring, I do okay. But when winter comes, everything gets worse.
I've been trying to bait him with a free trip to Tennessee, which he's up for, but wants to wait until springtime so he can come take care of a few things around my place here. I've got a few things that need fixed, and I'm like, hey, I'll pay for the trip. You just got to give me some time when you get here to take care of a few repair items.
Yeah, I feel very lucky to have him here. All right, Dave, well, let's get on to our next question. I've got Garth that says, is a health savings account a tax-free asset?
When we look at the health savings account, it is a great asset if done correctly. Now, the problem, we don't include it in our tax-free bucket in our planning because we can't 100% guarantee that you're going to use that money for health-related expenses. Now, the probability is you will, especially when we look at the statistics of what retirees will spend on medical costs. The average male is going to spend about $150,000 during the retirement years on medical expenses. Average female is going to spend about $135,000. So the chances are that you'll spend it, but we don't include it in our bucket. Now, if you can spend it, the great thing about it is you got money going in without paying tax and you got money coming out without paying tax. So I'm completely for them, Garth. I would encourage you, if you can maximize your contributions into these plans, to go ahead and do so. Now, you do need to make sure you're investing that money. I know many of the plans are structured to where it's just going into a bank account. Yeah, you've got the same problem where you're getting a 0.25% return. You want to make sure if you're trying to build it up as an investment portfolio because you're not using the money all the time, that you do have it invested so it can grow and you can get additional benefits. But it is treated a little different than any other asset out there.
And Dave, where do all these separate accounts come from? I mean, the health savings account we love and we use quite a bit, my wife and I, but where do these accounts come from? And why are these created specifically around what we're doing?
They're really designed to help people build a more safe and secure life in retirement. The health savings account was really to help people be able to get some benefit from the medical expenses they're paying. If you have spent any money lately on medical, I know you have, and I know I have, and I would assume most people that are listening have. When you look at the cost, I mean, even if you've got decent insurance through the government plan, you're still paying huge deductibles. You're still paying huge copays for many of you. I mean, it's not uncommon to go through $7,000+ a year on just out-of-pocket costs. So they're really put in to try to help middle and lower income level Americans be able to get some benefits there so they could not have to pay quite so much out because of the tax savings they would get.
So we have this health savings account. We also have your 3 bucket system, and we talk about this quite a bit on the show and on your podcast and webinars. All of these are set up essentially for what for us? So what all of these are laid out. It's not really saying, hey, you have to do this, but why do we lay all these out?
Yeah, because we really want to accomplish a successful retirement. I mean, if I were to compare it to what you're doing there with your farm, obviously you've got animals, you raise different vegetables during the summertime. Maybe you have some fruits that you're raising. You've got a whole tool shed full of different tools. I've got to assume that you've got a lawnmower to take care of the lawn. You've got shovels and rakes and tillers and different things that you're going to use. Well, all of those are there to help you run a more successful farm, or to enjoy your personal time that you can spend out there with the animals and what you're doing. Same thing with retirement. As we say, look, here's what our retirement looks like. For some people, they're going to need the whole shed full of tools. For other people, they're going to say, you know what, I really want my retirement to look like this. I'll just take the tools over there in the corner. So all of these are really designed to say, let's put them all together. Once we get the right amount of tools in the right place, then we should be able to give you the retirement that you're trying to get to.
And that's what I'm hoping that people realize from the show is we're really trying to guide people in the right direction. It's not just to say, hey, this is the only way. This is, this is a path we're laying out and you have to follow this, because everybody's path is going to be different. It's just the fact that you need to get started. You need to be able to realize that there's options out there, and it's not just like you said, throwing it in a savings account or a certificate of deposit or disappointment, but there's lots of things we can use.
And we're going to use different tools. You talk about your faucet that's got to be dug up 4 foot deep that you've got to go in and dig. Everybody's going to use a different tool to do that. Someone's going to use a pointed nose shovel. Someone else may use a post hole digger for a period of time. Others may use a pick, depending on how hard the dirt is. So again, depending on your situation, what skills you have, you're going to use different tools. And so when we look in retirement, it's that same way, that it's like, okay, we've got to dig a retirement, or we've got to build a retirement. What tools can we use and what tools do we have available? That's the other thing. I mean, if you owned a hardware store, it'd be pretty easy for you to say, hey, I can grab whatever is going to be the best tool. But if your shed's only got X tools, well, unless I spend some more money or incur some additional costs, maybe it's just easier for me to use the shovel alone and not worry about the pick this time.
Yeah, exactly. And again, for those watching live, I encourage you to go ahead and submit your retirement question. I mean, we go through everything from reverse mortgages to Medicare to Social Security. There's so many things that we really dive in on this show, and I want to make sure that we get your question answered. Or if your friends have questions, or maybe you're just thinking about things to help them, that's what we're here for. And Dave, if you're ready, let's jump over to Kimberly's question. She asked, are municipal bonds considered a tax-free investment?
Kimberly, they are not. And this is a little different than when we talk about a health savings account, because you've got two main issues when we talk about municipal bonds. Number one is if you move states, which often happens with retirees. They start their career working in one state, and then they decide they want to go somewhere where maybe like Jeff and Corey are down in Florida, where it's a little bit warmer. They don't have to deal with the harsh winters. So they end up moving. Well, once they move, those municipal bonds are going to be taxable in that new state. Now, Florida doesn't have an income tax, so maybe a bad example there. But if you are moving into a state that's got state income tax, you're going to have to pay tax in that new state. The far bigger issue, though, for people is it counts towards your provisional income. And this is what determines if Social Security is going to be taxed or not. So you've got a situation that if you've got enough interest from these municipal bonds and you add your 1/2 of Social Security that's used to calculate your provisional income, you may not be paying tax on those bonds, but you may be paying tax on your Social Security. And we definitely don't want to do that if we can help it when we look at trying to get you to a tax-free and risk-free retirement plan.
Dave, let's say I'm going to move to Tennessee in a couple of years. Let's hope. And if I'm getting into the municipal bonds and looking into this, what's the best advice if you know somebody's getting ready to relocate? What's the best options to help people? Because again, there's so many variations here. It's just always interesting to go through some of these scenarios.
The biggest thing is we've got to take into consideration the tax rates and what they're going to look at. Like if you take a situation like going from Utah to Tennessee, and again, they are all taxed differently. I mean,
Yeah.
retirement plans are taxed differently and income's taxed differently. In Tennessee, we don't have tax on W-2 income, so you wouldn't have to worry about a state tax on there. But you've got to take that into consideration, and more so if you're moving to a tax-free state from maybe a high tax state. Right now, we've got an exodus of people coming out of California. Some of those people could be paying as high as 13% in tax in the state of California. Well, then they move to, let's say, Nevada. There's no state tax. That's got to be figured in, because what we don't want to do is do a bunch of conversions, maybe in the time they're living in California, where they're subject to that tax, knowing that in a year from now, they're going to be in Nevada, and we could have waited to do that conversion and save that state tax immediately. So it is something that's got to get looked at. I realize there's a lot of ifs, ands, uncertainties.
Mhm.
Sometimes we definitely can't solve all of those, but we want to at least communicate and talk about it and see what the best strategy is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's always appropriate to go ahead and talk about some of these scenarios. Not everyone's going to fit every example you give, but I think it's important that we know that there's options out there. There may not be a solution for everything, but there sure is some opportunities if we plan ahead versus trying to go back and say, okay, I did this. Let's see if we can go back and figure out what money we can bring from the past, because it doesn't always work that way.
I would suggest too that people don't be afraid to talk about it. I mean, many times we don't talk about our retirement. We don't talk about these strategies, and it's always fun for me. I do a lot of planning with CPAs, and EAs, which is great because in general they're very organized. Most of them have spent a little more time planning for their retirement than maybe other professions have. So it makes it nice because these people have a good understanding of where they're at and allows us to talk on a much deeper level about where they're going. So I would say don't be afraid to educate yourself. We've got absolutely a ton of tools to help you do that. Books you can read, the webinars you can attend, videos you can watch, all these things to make sure you're getting yourself educated to where then you can have those educated conversations, because that happens. What you're going to find is you're going to start making better decisions. That is, you even working with an advisor, that together we're allowing you to make better decisions. You're feeling more comfortable with the decisions you're making, which then will lead you down a more safe and secure path.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, Dave, my next one comes from Jay. Jay says, I'm not rich. Should I worry about trying to get to the 0% tax in retirement?
Well, it depends on what you're referring to as rich, Jay. When we talk about, if we're saying, look, the only thing I'm going to have in retirement is my Social Security, I maybe got a few $1,000s set inside of a bank account. Well, by the nature of the way the tax system works, you're going to get to a 0% tax bracket because your Social Security is not going to be high enough that it's going to create provisional income and issues with taxation on that Social Security for most of you. Now, if we're looking at a situation where you're saying, I still may be in a 10% bracket, I don't have a lot of money, but I'm in one of the lower brackets, well, it becomes even more critical that we get you to the 0% bracket, because that money means far more to you oftentimes than it would for someone that's making $200,000 a year. Well, if they're
Mhm.
making $200,000 a year and have to give up $10,000 in taxes or so, I can probably work through that. I can adjust my lifestyle. But if you're making $30,000 a year and you're barely scraping by, and then the government comes in and says, look, Jay, you've got to pay an additional $2,000 in taxes that you didn't owe last year, that probably completely disrupted your budget. You're probably at a point now that you're saying, how do I do this? And I've seen it. I've seen clients that have been in that situation where all of a sudden they're hit with a big tax bill they weren't expecting. And when I say big, maybe even a few $1,000s, they may have to go on a payment plan. It's like, hey, I can't pay this based upon my current lifestyle and what my commitments are.
So do I have to be rich to retire then? Is that what Jay's saying?
No, you don't have to be rich to retire, but there are limits that you want to get to. I think many people have this misconception that somehow retirement's going to actually provide them the lifestyle that they had before. And if you've not done any prepare for that, not going to provide you that lifestyle. And I see it so many times where people have not quite set enough money aside. That's where it becomes important to plan early, because then we can start making sure that you're going to have the resources and the assets that you need available. Because if you're waiting and I have it happen where someone calls in their early 60s and says, look, I want to retire in the next 4 years, we run illustrations and plans and modules. And we're like, you can't retire until 70, 75. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you a different story, but the math and science we use doesn't lie, and you don't have enough assets available. So we don't have to retire rich. We've just got to be realistic in what we're trying to accomplish and then put forth the effort to accomplish the best retirement for ourselves.
Yeah, I love dispelling some of these myths that come out that tell us all these things that we have to do. And one of them is always I've heard is you have to be rich to retire, or you have to have your money in this particular account. And I think that as we talk about this, like you said, just talk about these things, work through them, because the more you do that, the more you get that out there, the more you realize that things can change and they will change, but you have to be ready and you have to prepare.
And don't worry about what you don't have. I mean, like, again, if you didn't prepare and you couldn't prepare, don't sit and worry your retirement that you don't have what someone else has. Enjoy what you've been given. I think that's something too that you've got to understand. I think back, there was a period of my time in my life, and you remember the CR. I took my family and we moved into a one-bedroom apartment for about 4 months. It was and again, it wasn't me and my wife. It was me, my wife, and at that time we had four of our six children, I believe, at that point. So we're in a one-bedroom apartment, six of us. The fridge didn't even work. We had to use a fridge next door. That was one of the happiest times of my life because we spent time together. Yes, we were on top of each other, but we took the right attitude. The kids said, look, we're going to make the best of this. My wife said, we're going to make the best of it. We just enjoyed that period of time. And I tell you, if your retirement doesn't look quite like what you wanted it to, don't sit there and worry and wish it had been different. Accept what you have and make the best of it and enjoy the years you have. There's no need to spend your retirement wishing you had something that the neighbors have or wishing you'd done something different. You're at that point, enjoy those future years.
I even look at somebody like Peter, and he's scared, right? He's scared because he says the market scares me. Should I consider putting my money under my mattress? And so this is another thing. People get terrified because they don't have that knowledge.
And we're seeing it right now for sure with everything that's going on with the country. We've got all these uncertainties. But what you need to understand is when we look back historically, things always go up. I mean, over time, things are going to come back. Yeah, they're going to dip at times, and we need to be very careful. One of the reasons we like to use annuities in many of our planning, especially if we're doing conversions, is because the way they're structured, we're not going to have that collapse off the table. All of a sudden, you did a conversion, you paid a bunch of tax, and now all of a sudden your money gets cut in half. We want to try to secure and protect that going forward. So I would not suggest you put it in your mattress, a very unsafe place to put it.
Mhm.
Not many ways you could lose that money. But I think the biggest thing is you've just got to make sure you understand the risks and then allocate accordingly. We can still take some risk in our retirement money and be able to still get consistent returns over time if we do it correctly.
And Dave, before we end the show, I'm going to ask one more questions because this one doesn't happen very often. But Linda has a good question. I mean, I guess if you're a regular in Vegas like you, but you don't gamble. But for an instance like this, are my winnings from the sports book a good source of tax-free income?
Let me talk a little bit about this because I do have some inside knowledge first. The answer is no, but I want to give you some feedback on this because as a CPA that practiced in Vegas for the last 25 years, I've had experience with people who do make a lot of money. I've got one client who has made millions of dollars a year from the sport book. What's interesting about that to me, CR, is there's no reporting of any of that income.
Hmm.
If you go put money into a slot machine and you end up winning and it gets over a certain level, you're going to get a W-2G that's going to tell the government how much you won. They have absolutely no reporting, which is beyond unimaginable to me when you look at the amount of money that's going through these places. Now, that being said, it is a crime and it is wrong if you take that money and don't report it. You're going to go to jail. So please do not do that. It's not the recommendation, and they didn't either. They reported all of their income. There was no issues there. But I do find it odd that many times people think that because somebody didn't report the income, that's tax free to me. I can just put it in my bank account. I don't have to worry. That's not the way the government system works. If you have earned income, that needs to go on your return, or you could face criminal and civil penalties as a result of not reporting that income on your actual tax return.
And Dave, I mean, I look at this as what was said earlier. Do I put my money under my mattress, or maybe I don't have enough in retirement, so I'm either going to go to maybe gamble and see if I can get more money that way to save for my retirement. I mean, what kind of attitude do we have to have and make sure we don't put ourselves in those bad situations? Because frankly, that's not going to work out.
Yeah, the problem is you've got a greed bug that kicks in for many people. We didn't prepare. So, and I saw it the other day. I was talking to one of my really good friends, and I felt really bad in their situation because the husband had one plan that he wanted to do with the retirement because he realized they were behind and they need to catch up. She had a completely other plan that was more safe and secure, saying, "Yeah, we haven't prepared, but it doesn't mean we should just go risk it all out there and hope it works." And it was creating major havoc in their marriage. They were having some major issues with it. And I think that's what we've got to look at, is because we didn't prepare, many people get sucked into Ponzi schemes. They get sucked into investments that they shouldn't be getting involved in. They start taking additional risk, and it just takes the problem and multiplies it, puts ourselves in even a worse situation. And we've just got to realize that, look, average rates of return is what we've got to look at. Now, once in a while, you're going to have that story where someone did do amazing. They ended up taking these things. But for every story that's told, there's 99 stories of people that it didn't work out for, and their retirement looked worse than it did before they got started.
Yeah. And that's what we're hoping to avoid, is making sure that we're ahead of what we're doing. We're planning. And I appreciate those who are watching live. Jeff saying, hey, great show today. We're so glad that you're here, Jeff and Corey and Chantil, and those who have been joining us live, and for those on replay. Thank you for being here and for joining part of our conversation. It's so important that we get through this, Dave, that we continually educate ourselves. I mean, that's the one thing you've done very well, is you jump on and you educate. I mean, we have so many different platforms we use, from podcasts to webinars to Facebook and YouTube. And you continually do this. And I wanted to pop up one thing that we're doing brand new that will be coming out very soon here. And that's your LinkedIn retirement show. And we're going to be starting this. So before we end, Dave, tell me why we're adding new things and continually doing things.
Yeah, we want to make sure that you're getting as much information as you can to be able to make the right decisions. Now, historically, prior to this, I do a number of webinars each week, and range anywhere from 1 to 5 or 6 webinars a week. During that period of time, we get tons of questions. Sometimes we could have hundreds of questions going through that process. Historically, what I've done is done a follow-up video. We've sent it only to the recipients that were there in the webinar to answer those questions. But what we find is there's more and more of an interest for other people to understand the answers to these questions that are being asked. So we said, instead of creating individual videos that go to a small group of people, let's use LinkedIn as a platform to be able to allow us to answer those questions, so those who are interested can get the answers to all of them, so they can start better understanding, one, maybe questions they should ask. It's part of it's that to understand for their own retirement, but also maybe it's a question they already had that now they have the answer to help them better plan for what their future might look like.
So it's really fun being part of this, because again, we got to work with advisors like Jeff and Corey and others, and Dave. We got to go over and constantly work with different clients and those who have retirement questions or planning, Social Security. And that's the best part about this, is at the very end of the day, you're helping people get a little bit closer and a little bit closer to their retirement goals, so they're tax-free and risk-free retirement. And you're a big part of that. So thanks for being here and for doing that.
You're welcome. Happy to share any information I have. I've got a lot of knowledge, drilled down in this brain of mine, and I'm happy to give it to anybody I can if I can help it make their life any better.
And again, for all those watching, thank you so much for being here, being part of the show. We'll see you again next Wednesday. And again, we'll be sending out an email. Look for our LinkedIn show that will be coming out this week. And we're really excited. So thanks again for being here. We'll see you guys later.
See you guys. Take care.